The Great Emu War of 1932, when Australia declared war on birds and lost. Imagine a nation, fresh from the echoes of global conflict, facing an unexpected and utterly bizarre new enemy. Not a foreign power, not a political uprising, but an army of large, flightless birds. This is the incredible, almost comical, true story of the Great Emu War of 1932, a peculiar chapter in Australian history where military might met avian resilience, and the birds surprisingly emerged victorious. Emus, towering birds reaching up to 6 feet tall, are native to Australia and known for their powerful legs and insatiable appetites. They are incredibly fast, capable of reaching speeds of up to 50 kilometers per hour. But an emu is a surprisingly difficult target, and their erratic, zigzagging movements made them almost impossible to hit with a single well-aimed shot. Ammunition was expensive, and their efforts were proving futile against the sheer numbers. Major Meredith later remarked, his initial confidence clearly shaken. They mounted one of the Lewis guns onto a truck, attempting to chase down the birds. This was a far cry from the decisive victory envisioned. The Department of Defense, facing growing public ridicule and mounting criticism from within its own ranks. Major Merritt's final report claimed around 986 emus killed with 9,860 rounds of ammunition, a kill ratio of roughly 10 rounds per emu. While this was a vast improvement, it was still far from the original goal of eradicating the problem. The first phase of the Great Emu War had concluded in a resounding defeat for the Australian military. The farmers themselves continued to struggle, resorting to bounties and fencing to protect their crops. Decided to withdraw the troops on November 8th. Often unpredictable challenges of environmental management and the limitations of conventional military solutions when applied to ecological problems. For the Australian military, it was a minor, albeit publicly embarrassing, incident. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the most formidable opponents are not who or what we expect, and that even a well-equipped army can find itself outmaneuvered by a flock of determined, if unwitting, birds. It's a tale that perfectly encapsulates the quirky spirit of Australia and its unique challenges, where the vastness of the land and its wild inhabitants often have the last laugh. For the emus, it was a testament to their resilience and adaptability. This proved equally fruitless. The truck was too slow and unstable on the rugged terrain, making accurate firing impossible. Instead, more conventional methods of pest control, such as exclusion fencing and a bounty system, proved more effective in the long run. The emus simply outmaneuvered them, darting into the bush or scattering in unpredictable directions. The machine guns, designed for static positions or slow-moving infantry, were utterly unsuited for a rapidly changing engagement against agile biological targets. The media, initially eager for a story of military prowess, began to report on the dismal failures. Newspapers across Australia and even internationally started mocking the Emu War, highlighting the absurdity of a well-equipped army being outsmarted by birds, or perhaps genuinely believing this was a straightforward solution. He decided to deploy the military. Public opinion began to turn, with many seeing it as a waste of resources and an embarrassing spectacle. They appealed to the government, reminding them of the promised pest control. The Minister of Defense at the time was Sir George Pearce, and perhaps in a moment of slight overconfidence, the farmers again pleaded for help. And despite the previous debacle, Major Meredith and his men were redeployed on November 13th. The second attempt, lasting for several weeks, saw slightly more success due to a change in tactics. The soldiers learned to ambush smaller groups and to set up firing positions near waterholes where the emus gathered. They also had the benefit of the weather turning hotter, which made the emus more predictable in their search for water. They weren't just eating the nascent wheat crops. They were flattening fences, trampling young plants. His command consisted of a mere 2 soldiers, Sergeant S. McMurray and Gunner J. O'Halloran. Major Meredith's men attempted to ambush a group of around 50 emu. The Lewis guns, designed for human targets, proved cumbersome and difficult to aim accurately at the fast-moving, elusive birds. The emus, displaying an unexpected degree of tactical awareness, would scatter in small groups at the first sign of danger, making it impossible to get a good sustained burst on a large number. Their arsenal, however, was more substantial. To Lewis, automatic machine guns and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The plan was simple, or so they thought. Heard the emus then unleash overwhelming firepower. Local farmers, weary but hopeful, offered their services to drive the emus towards the waiting guns, now watching their livelihoods systematically destroyed by a relentless tide of large, hungry birds. The expedition was also accompanied by a cameraman, intent on documenting this supposedly quick and decisive victory. This was, after all, a modern army with modern weapons, surely capable of handling some oversized birds, and creating vast, destructive swaths through fields that represented the farmers' last hope of income. Imagine the frustration and despair of these returned soldiers who had faced human enemies with courage. Their appeals to the local authorities grew increasingly desperate. The year is 1932. the world is grappling with the devastating grip of the Great Depression. Australia, a vast continent still finding its footing, is no exception. In the western reaches of the country, particularly the Campion district of Western Australia, many of whom had served bravely in the trenches of World War I, had been settled on marginal lands. They were encouraged to take up farming, specifically wheat, as part of a post-war agricultural scheme. The government had promised support, including financial aid and assistance with pests. These farmers, veterans hardened by war, were now battling a new kind of foe, the unforgiving Australian outback. Volatile markets and an unexpected, overwhelming surge of feathered invaders. The problem arrived with the seasonal rains. A massive migration of approximately 20,000 emus, driven by drought further inland, began to descend upon the fertile farmland. The farmers, many of whom were still armed with their wartime rifles, tried to fight back. The choice of military leader fell upon Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery. The initial engagement was, to put it mildly, a disaster. The war officially began on November 2, 1932. If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. Over the next few days, the machine gunners tried various tactics. After about a week of frustrating, largely ineffective engagements, Major Meredith reported that they had used approximately 2,500 rounds of ammunition, with an estimated kill count of only around 300 emus. However, the farmers' plight remained dire. The emus, emboldened perhaps by their perceived victory, continued their destructive feast. By early December, the operation was finally called off for good. The Great Emu War became a enduring symbol of human folly in the face of nature's relentless power. In the years that followed, Australian farmers continued to face issues with emu populations, but direct military intervention was never again considered. The story of the Great Emu War endures as a fascinating and often humorous footnote in history. What do you think of this peculiar historical skirmish?
Subscribe for more history's weird, twisted, and forgotten events.